it's really hard for me to keep telling them that it's going to get better when, for the second year in a row, they're working 30% harder for 20% less.
This is the Pass the Pitch podcast with Anna Frazzetto. Each episode, we sit down with bold thinkers and industry trailblazers to uncover the strategies, stories, and sparks of inspiration that drive growth and transformation. Let's get started.
Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited that we are starting season 3 with a bang. So excited to have Eric Gregg here with us today. He is the founder of Clearly Rated. And I think everyone in the staffing industry knows Clearly Rated. What I love is how you describe when I was doing a little bit of research and preparation, how you describe this in LinkedIn is that you allow service firms to easily measure NPS from their clients and talent to improve retention and account growth. You specialize in client and employee loyalty and retention for professional services firms, specifically accounting, legal, insurance, and staffing. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you, Eric.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate it. And very, very excited to be a part of this.
Excellent. So why don't we just jump right in? I always like to ask a little bit about, kind of on the leadership front and some thought process and kind of as you evolve in your career, what's the best business decision you almost didn't make and what pushed you over the edge?
Yeah, I've had actually a couple of those, and they were early in my career. One of them was to leave and start the business that I started before Clearly Rated. And that was, I had a good job coming out of undergrad, but I worked for, and I know we're going to be talking a lot about leadership. Like I worked for a guy that was a fantastic public speaker and a miserable leader. And I just wasn't happy. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel engaged in the full way. And so I said, you know what? I know I'm going back to grad school. I should just hold on and do this. And then it just didn't fit. It just wasn't, I was not looking forward to it. I had that Sunday like dread that comes when you're in the wrong position and you just are, oh God, Monday's coming. And so I reached out to a former marketing professor of mine and another gentleman that I knew in the area. I said, hey, if I stop working here, can you keep me busy? And ultimately we decided to start a business that was just the opposite of that. I had two people that I really looked up to, similar to my first boss, but the difference was that I felt really heard. And so I went to I did that for a few years. Then I went to grad school. And when I came out of grad school, I had a chance to go and take a job. And I said, you know what, I think I want to go start my own thing again. And these two guys that I adore, that I'm going to actually see this week, I'm still in touch with, they both said, why don't you go get some experience, make some money as a consultant, do the typical post MBA things. And I just felt like, gosh, I don't want to do that. I want to kind of start my own thing. And so I did. And looking back, the lesson that I had from that is that there's never a perfect time to do anything. And if you feel like you're compelled to go do something, you really have to kind of follow that sense of purpose and that sense of desire, because especially if it's not the more stable thing that everybody thinks you should do, if you're still being pulled that other direction, it's probably for a good reason.
And what I love about that, Eric, is like following your gut, right? It's like you have that passion and just go for it, right? Don't waste time. Just go for it. But sometimes it's scary, right? You have all these other voices that are telling you not to do it or it's too risky.
Yeah, I think if it was the obvious choice, then you would have so many more people that would start their own businesses. and the fact of the matter is that it is hard, and it's also really rewarding, and it's also, did I mention hard? I'll say hard again, right? I mean, it's not easy. It's not the easy path. But ultimately, if that's something that really inspires you, you should go and do that. And the same for your career, right? You need to be in a spot where you really feel passion for what you're doing. And if you're not, like, there's no way to fake that. You have to find people that you're passionate about locking arms with and doing something important with. And you have to feel like that that purpose is there and that importance is there. Otherwise, I feel like you just end up, looking back and 5 months turned into 5 years, and you don't ever get that time back.
And that's so true. Like I think about, like my personal journey now in starting, starting a company. I It's something that I've been wanting to do probably for the last, I would say 5, 7 years. And it's taken me this long to actually, kind of pull the plug on it and say, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm finally gonna do it. So that's very sound advice, and absolutely always follow your heart. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what's one underrated skill or trait that more people in sales or in leadership should master?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and there's probably a list of 10. So I'm just gonna pick the one that really jumps out at me, and it's really kind of two. It's empathy and trust. And I'll start with the empathy side of it. I think that too often we are focused on our goals, and we have a hard time spending a minute in somebody else's shoes to understand what would motivate them. Like, I know for me, motivating me is growing this business, but for them, what's motivating them is likely to be at least a little bit different and maybe radically different. And I think that we see this a lot in the data, with the surveys that we do. We see a lot of leadership that are, Gen X and some baby boomer and some Gen Y. And we see a lot of the teams that they're leading being a generation, sometimes two generations younger than them. And trying to motivate a very different workforce from yourself using the things that motivate you is a recipe for disaster and for mediocrity. And so I think that you have to, and that's where that empathy piece comes in, right? To try to start from a place of understanding, and then trying to build out a way that you can reach those individuals and find that shared space, because there oftentimes is shared space. It just doesn't always show up in the obvious ways. And then the second piece of this is, I'm amazed throughout my career, and I'd be curious if you had this experience too, but you will outperform 75% of the people if you just do what you say you're going to do. Just be accountable and follow through on the things that you say that you're going to do, and are already in the top, third, maybe top quarter of individuals in the workforce, in my experience. And so, really, like, make sure that what you're doing, you would do if there was a room full of people, just in the same way that you do if it was by yourself. And I think that that's ultimately where become trustworthy, and you earn the trust of others. And that's, to me, a really important piece. Like, if you have a customer that would be better served going a different way, then tell them that. And you'll make yourself so much more credible when you're trying to convince them that they really should use you, if you've already told them 2 times when they'd be better off going a different route.
I couldn't agree more, Eric. One of the things that I find interesting is that you can actually gain such respect and become a trusted advisor for an organization, right? That works so well when you can instill that trust. I would also add patience.
When we go to the empathy side of it too, like, you know, really understanding how people want to be sold to. On the sales side of things, I think we get so caught up in the formulaic way that we want to sell, and the different ecosystems of sales strategies that exist. And there's a lot to be learned from a lot of those. That being said, none of them will work if you're not in touch with what your customer actually needs, how your customer wants to buy. And I think that that's the really good salespeople can understand that, okay, when I'm talking to Anna, I'm going to talk about this a little bit differently than when I'm talking to Eric, because how they want to buy, the process that they want to go through is very, very different. And being able to tailor to that and adjust that on the fly, to me, is the sign of somebody that really understands their buyer.
Exactly. And you know what? And that's a lot of times as I'm working with new salespeople or new to the profession, patience is one of those skills that they just don't have because they're anxious to kind of get a book of business. But then trust and empathy is even harder to teach. especially with salespeople. As a leader, I mean, I would almost think that that's got to be like mandatory. Like you have to have these skills to be a successful leader or to be able to lead a company.
You would think so. You would think so, but I have seen so many leaders, and honestly, we've hired leaders at times that have not had that in the way that you would expect them to, and it just becomes a blind spot, just in the way that if I can't really handle the analytics of the different strategic options, that's a blind spot or a weakness. That empathy piece is really hard to overcome. I've seen people do it. They'll surround themselves with the leaders directly below them that are exceptional at that and can kind of buffer on that. But the reality is that it is a skill that is hard to overcome if you don't have some core level of empathy.
Exactly, and if you think about it, the way a culture is built within a company is from the leadership, is senior leadership. And so if they're not empathetic and they're just looking at their next level of management to be able to handle that for them, it's going to come through and it's
Yeah.
going to affect the overall culture of the organization, which will affect the revenue growth of a
Yeah.
company. There's definitely proven stats out there that show if you have a poor culture, it's going to affect your overall revenue growth.
Yeah. And you have higher turnover, and the people that don't leave that are just unhappy probably do even more damage than those that leave. But in the staffing space, when we think about this, like we have tremendous turnover of our account managers and our recruiters, and they're oftentimes leaving a team that they don't resonate with. It's not, that adage that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. In staffing, they quit teams. And the manager is certainly a huge part of that team, but not the only part of that team. And so we have to look for opportunities to really drive, the engagement throughout the entire team.
Excellent point. Let's talk a little bit about motivating teams, right? So how do you keep your team motivated when results aren't coming as fast as expected, especially when you take a look at economic climate, political climate, just everything out there that, especially I do a lot on the tech side of things, certain industries that have just not come back. And it's already like we're approaching the third year and it's still kind of dragging their feet. How do you keep your teams motivated?
Yeah, I'll give you an example first. I talked to staffing industry leaders, and we are talking exactly about this. And they put it the best way that I've heard it. It's really hard for me to keep telling them that it's going to get better when, for the second year in a row, they're working 30% harder for 20% less. And I thought that that was a really good way to sort of put a point on the challenge of motivating when the results aren't where any of us expected them to be. And that's certainly been the case in the staffing industry recently. I will say, I think we're still trying to figure it out. A couple things that I do think matter a lot is I think you have to really celebrate the activities that will ultimately lead to success. And look at sort of micro win opportunities, right? When everybody's hitting quota, going past quota, like, you don't have to necessarily shine the light on the fact that, Josie just hit her activity goal. But if we're not getting to quota and somebody's hitting their activity goal, well, you better believe we should be really celebrating the heck out of it and kind of driving that, forward as a part of it. And then the other thing too is that I think we can't. This is something that we learned in COVID. So, like everybody, when sort of early March, like everything shut down, there was tremendous uncertainty. We had people pause programs. They didn't know, the staffing firms that they didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen. And so we were a small business and tight cash flow, and the entire leadership team and the entire company, we just had a very open conversation and said, look, I can't predict the future. This is, none of us have ever been through anything like this. But I will tell you this, like, every time we retain an account, land a new account, are able to grow, anything like that, every time we do that, we give ourselves the benefit of having more flexibility on how we handle the things that are outside of our control. And that really resonated, and we really believed it, and it was really true. And as a leadership team and all the way down the organization, I mean, we literally every single week we were celebrating things, and then on each team, every single day, we took this mindset where we were trying to hit quarterly goals, and then monthly goals, and now we said, look, we don't even have the luxury of waiting to see if we hit a month goal. Like we have to do this week, and then if we do that, then we earn the right to do this next week. And that sense of purpose and the fact that they weren't trying to do that for me or for my co-founder. They were trying to do that for each other because it was one very tangible thing that they could do that was helping people they cared about get through a really difficult time. And so I think the more that you can really shine the light on success and shorten those timelines so that you can, really kind of reset. Hey, last week didn't go well. Great. We're already on to another week. Right. And being able to reset that on a pretty regular basis, I think is key.
So that's such a great message because I think a lot of times what happens is I almost use the analogy that if you're on a flight and there's a lot of turbulence and the flight attendant is carrying on with her or his business and they're not phased by it, you kind of relax. You're like, okay, we're okay. Nothing's going to happen. But if I start seeing the flight attendant that's like buckling up and looks like that they're about to have a mental breakdown, I
Yeah.
am going to be sending messages to my family that this plane is going down.
Right.
It's the same thing with business and with work. If I see that leadership is still upbeat and we're not meeting our revenue targets, but they're trying to motivate the team and almost like have the to quote Ted Lasso, be a guppy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to focus on the negativity of what I lost yesterday or how we didn't make our numbers last month. I'm going to focus on the great activity, to your point, that we're having this month. I think people will respond positively to that and they actually do work harder to try to make a difference. So it's all a matter of like the attitude.
Yeah. And I think it's a blend, Anna, because what you don't want to be is you don't want to be that flight attendant who's still telling everybody everything's okay as everybody can see the mountain that we're about to run into. By the way, these analogies are not great as I'm about to hop on a flight tomorrow. So I won't go back to it again, but only because I don't want to imagine a flight going into a mountain. But the point is that there has to be realistic optimism in there, right? And there's always something to be optimistic about. There's always something to be celebrating. There's always a win. Sometimes they're smaller than others, and sometimes that one win is hidden amongst a bunch of losses. But there's always something to celebrate. There's always progress. As long as we're always getting better, as long as we are always putting forth 100% of the effort that we can, and as long as we are trying to do what's right by our clients and our employees, then I think we put ourselves in a spot where we will eventually figure out ways to win on a more regular basis to get those bigger wins and to go forward.
Absolutely. And actually that's a phrase that we should kind of coin is, realistic optimism. You don't want to have false hope out there. So very, very valid point. Eric, let me ask, what's one mindset shift that unlocked new growth for you or your team?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, I will say this. This was amazing to me. I did this a few years before COVID, and we had taken some investment from a number of people that have really been mentors to me in the space. People Dan Campbell, Jeff Bowling, Jeff Harris, Aaron Green, and I had this opportunity to really have them come invest and help us get to the next level, and that was really exciting to me and our leadership team. But with that, we were also making a transition into a software from a services company. We were also, investing additional money into that growth with a higher growth expectation. And so I asked people, and we'd had a pretty good year. This is 2018. I asked everybody as we went into 2019. I said, write down on a piece of paper how fast you think we can grow this next year, and they wrote it down. And then we're still all together in the same spot, so everybody hands it in, and while we're doing something else, I write down all those numbers and average it out. And the average response was like 6% slower than we had grown the prior year, and like 8% slower than we had grown if you just averaged out the last like 8 years. And that was really eye opening to me because what it told me was that we've got to do a better job of sort of educating the team on the financial performance and the business performance. And number two, man, we can be really self-defeating, right? That and I'll misquote this, but the example of the fact that nobody had cracked a 4-minute mile, and then once Bannister cracked it, it was broken like 60 times in the next decade. Um, just kind of shows how self-limiting our brains can be. And if we haven't done it, we don't believe we can do it. And so you have to find ways to break through so that you're not your own you don't create your own ceiling.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and look, I mean, you hear so many industry leaders that talk about, kind of having those internal voices that tell you that you can't
Yep.
do it, or because it's never been done before, to not even attempt it because it's never been done before. But you're right. I mean, that's a great, great story, and definitely very eye opening, and it makes you wonder, to your point, as far as transparency, right? So how in tune or in touch are they with the potential of the organization?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And you have to communicate that with more regularity than I think as a leader you naturally think you do, because you're thinking about this all the time. And so you're locked in, maybe your leadership team's locked in, but you go a level or 2 below that within the organization, and you can't expect them to have the same level of, um, financial focus and to understand. And again, comes back to what we talked about early on, like, if I just tell them, "Hey, the business is gonna grow 20%," that doesn't really inspire anything, right? But if I can show them, "Hey, here's what you did last year. Here's why it's gonna be even better
Mhm.
this year," and you're bought into this, you see this, it makes sense, yes, I see how we can do that. um Now it kind of makes sense, right? Now people are signing up for that and saying, yeah, that's great, like, we only have to do that much more and we have X, Y, and Z that's helping us. I think that's going to make a huge impact.
Excellent, excellent. All right. So our last question here. Tell me about a time when a seemingly small cultural detail made a big impact on a deal or a hire or a business decision.
I feel like the example I'm going to give is one that a number of people have, but we're no different on this side. We had a lot of emails and a lot of communication that was coming just whenever we were ready. And a bunch of us on the leadership team had young children. Um, and it came to my attention that people were feeling pressured to respond if I would send an email at like 5 in the morning, or at 8:30 or 9 at night, or at midnight, all of which was happening at different times because I had, a 2-year old and a 4-year old at home. And so there were times when I was up and I was just trying to manage the different aspects of my life. And but I didn't want that pressure, and so I started to go into the mindset of okay, well, I'll just schedule those to send. And then I had one that sent that it was so clear that it had been scheduled the night before because we'd gotten like 4 emails that made what I had scheduled completely irrelevant. And so I finally said, I've got to be able to do some of this, right? And so we put in my email signature. I basically said, I have 2 young children. My work hours might not be your work hours. Please respond within your normal work time frame. And I cannot tell you how impactful that was internally and even externally. It gets mentioned with regularity. My kids aren't even that young anymore, and I don't remove it because it gives me permission to engage when I can engage. And sometimes, that's not during the day, and a lot of times it is during the day. And so that shift I think was really important for us internally, to allow people not just to feel like they didn't have to respond if a manager sent something, but also to feel like they could send something, when it was convenient to them, without the expectation that somebody's going to hop on, half hour later at 9 o'clock at night and respond.
Oh, I love that. And it's so interesting because it makes me think about when I used to travel internationally a lot. Um, I'm sending emails like literally 24 hours around the clock, depending on what part of the world you're in. And often I would add um, like a PS saying, just so you know, I'm, en route to Australia. So, don't feel like you have to respond. But putting it part of your signature, I think that's brilliant. And I wish I had that. And definitely, I think when you don't have like your normal work schedule, that makes it so much easier for people to kind of interpret why you're sending messages around the clock.
Yeah, absolutely. It just kind of gives a little bit more context, and there's times when you are going to ask people to go above and beyond, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to use up all of that goodwill on times when you really don't care if they respond
Right.
now or if they respond, in the next 24 hours or 8 hours or whatever it is.
No, that's terrific. All right. So, Eric, I don't know if you're ready for this, but we're going to have some fun. I'm going to ask you some fun rapid fire questions
Okay.
that are not necessarily, 100%, business related. All right. The first one: what's the weirdest email subject line you've ever received or sent?
This doesn't seem to happen very often anymore, but I got this email a while back and I felt so bad for this lady who was just clearly having a bad day. But you used to get those emails every once in a while where instead of like saying dear Eric, it would say dear, parentheses first name. And they had clearly done some kind of a merge and it had not taken.
Worked.
And so this poor lady sends this out and it's got all the placeholders in it. And about 30 minutes later, she sends a reply to all of this. And what she means to say is, I apologize for any inconvenience this has caused you. But she's in such a rush to recover from the first email that she accidentally writes in the subject line, I apologize for any incontinence this has caused you. And
I knew you were
felt
going to say
I
that.
just felt for her. I'm like, "Oh, no, this day is just getting worse."
Oh my god. I think that's gonna definitely take the prize. That's awesome. I love
Yeah,
that. Okay.
yeah.
If you're a sales pitch and had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh god, in the current market, the first one that comes to mind is, what's that group? I think it's called, Chumbawamba. It's the I get knocked down, but I get up again. I feel like that's for, like, all the staffing firms, in, 2024, 2025 timeframe. If we're channeling my inner emotions, it's probably, the song Right Here, Right Now,
Oh,
because I always wanted to get done right here, right now. But I think probably the one I would go with is Believer by Imagine Dragons. So, because I feel like I'm constantly trying to make believers out of people as the impact of client experience and talent experience and internal employee experience.
oh my goodness. Believer is one of my most favorite songs. So couldn't agree with you more. That's a great, great song. And it would be a great theme song. Okay, if you had to give yourself a completely ridiculous job title based on what you actually do all day, what would it be?
I think I may have actually done that, right? I'm CXS, which sounds like a bad In Excess cover band, but is CX strategist. And when we brought in an outside CEO, I basically told our board, look, what I want to do is what I got into business to do. Like I don't want to solve internal problems. I want to be with our customers. I want to be helping in the data and focusing those pieces. So I feel like that's the place. When I was the CEO, it felt like chief fire putter outer, chief problem solver. You kind of get into that mode where it's sometimes it's HR and sometimes it's not. And I loved that about the position, but it's also exhausting, right? And you start to get to the point where you're like, oh, we started this business and had initial success because I was good at this, and I don't even really do that anymore, and I kind of miss it. And so that was the made up path that I went on.
Okay, if you had to describe your career as a type of food, what would it be and why?
Oh man. So I've been in this space, in the staffing space for almost 20 years. And I started the business about 21 years ago. And so I would say it's like pizza. And for the first 10 years, like I just thought that it was like pizza, and it was all good pizza. And then, I went through, yeah, I guess it would be the first 5 years, because in 2008, it was that first slice of pizza where somebody tries to get too clever, and it's like, they put peanut butter on the pizza just because they think they can. And I'm like, oh, not all pizza is great. And then it was like back to great pizza again. And then 2020 came, and there was that peanut butter pizza again, reminding me that not every piece of pizza is great. So I'm gonna say it's pizza, it's been great, except for the couple times that it wasn't.
I think that is a very creative way to describe it. I would probably, in my mind, I was thinking like lasagna, just
Oh,
because of the multiple layers
oh,
that you kind
nice.
of have to, yeah, deal with. But I don't know. I might copy yours and use the pizza, because that was a great way to describe it. Okay, so if you have to close a deal, but the only way you can communicate is through emojis, what's your message? What emojis would you use?
Oh my God, this is not play to my strengths. This is where you make a Gen Xer look like a silent generation. But I think probably what I would start with is like, the confused emoji, then the like frustrated emoji, which is what most people have, where they're like, wait a second, how did we lose that opportunity? How did we lose that account? How did we lose that employee? And then there's like the light bulb emoji, and then oh look, I even made it with the MacBook tries to give my emotions a thumbs up there. And then there's probably like the happy face emoji, and then hopefully if I've done anything right somewhere, there's a laughing emoji in there.
That's a great timeline of emojis.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then don't forget, like, there needs to be a dollar sign emoji, because you've
that's
closed the
right.
deal. Right,
Yes,
exactly.
that's exactly right. That's maybe why I'm not a terribly good salesperson, because that's the emoji I left out.
Right. No, that's fine. Eric, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really loved having you, and great questions, great exchange. Can't wait to have you again. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Pass the Pitch podcast with Anna Frazzetto. Don't forget to subscribe and share. In the next episode, we talk to Joanna Monroe on adaptive leadership, authentic listening, and betting on yourself. See you then.